Hello, wonderhussie here, just hanging out in my home office here in the casita at my Death Valley compound because I went into town the other day and had my oil changed, and well, my mechanic says I need a new bushing on one of my shocks, and until he can order the part and replace it for me, that means no off-roading. So since I can't go to any far-flung ghost towns or hot springs, I decided to start a new feature called Tales from the Casita. That's right, it's story time. I didn't start a YouTube channel until 2016, but believe it or not, I had a lot of interesting adventures before then. So today, I'm gonna tell you the story behind this photo. Now, I already made a video about a year ago talking about the time I went on Jeopardy, but in my endless quest to make a quick buck, that's not the only game show I've been on. I also went on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. When I was living in Vegas, it was easy to audition for all these shows because they would all come to town and hold these mass auditions, which makes sense from their point of view because they know a lot of people travel through Vegas, and this way, everyone gets a chance to audition without the game show having to go have auditions in all these little towns or expecting everybody else to come to New York or LA to audition. So just like I auditioned for Jeopardy way back in the day in 2003 at the Maxim Hotel in Las Vegas, a few years later I heard they were having auditions for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire right across the street at the Tuscany. Now, one thing I'd figured out by this point is that everyone thinks they can get on these shows, so auditioning for one of them is a whole day affair because you have to wait in a really, really, really long line. And if you're gonna spend an entire day waiting in line, well, you might as well make it worth your while by doing what you can to make sure they pick you as a contestant. Because it's not just about passing the test. I mean, yes, just like on Jeopardy, they did give us a written test to make sure we were smart or at least knew a bunch of trivia, but they don't just want a bunch of nerdy brainiacs because, well, that would be boring television. They want people with fun personalities and interesting backstories. I think I mentioned in my Jeopardy vlog that they were kind of sketchy about telling us exactly how many questions we had to get right in order to pass the test. And I think that's because they might want to be able to fudge it every now and then to let someone interesting on the show, even if they don't get every single answer right. I mean, as long as you get enough of the questions right to where you're not going to be a total dud if you get on the show, well, I think they might have a sort of sliding scale when it comes to grading those tests. So if you want to be on a game show, my advice is definitely to study up and be smart, but also be fun and personable and vivacious, and above all, have a good story about what you would do with the money if you win. Because they always want to know what you would do with the money if you won the $1 million or whatever the prize is on that particular show. And they definitely don't want to hear you say, pay off my mortgage or pay off my student loans. So when I went down to audition for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I'm not sure if I thought of this ahead of time or if I just came up with it spur of the moment, but I told them I would use the money to get boobs. That's right, boobs. I've been pretty flat-chested my entire life, and I spent my whole adolescence hoping and praying that I would eventually develop, but I never did. And then I moved to Vegas, where it seemed like every woman had ginormous fake breastises, and I felt even more inadequate. Now, at that time, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was on ABC, which was owned by Disney, and it might still be, I'm not sure. But I wasn't sure they would go for a story like that, you know what I mean? It's more Howard Stern than Disney. But they did! I told them if I won the $1 million, I would use it to buy boobs, and they put me on the show. Now, of course, they didn't just put me on the show because I had a funny story. I did have to pass the test. But let me tell you something, that test was way easier than the test to get on Jeopardy. I mean, for Jeopardy, it was something like either 30 or 50 fill in the blank questions. And like I said, they didn't tell you how many questions you had to get right in order to pass, but I do remember them being really tough questions that covered a range of information from the Bible to Shakespeare to Destiny's Child lyrics, and you basically just had to write in the answer if you thought you knew it. Well, with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, it was like 1,000 times easier because the test was multiple choice, which I guess makes sense because the show itself is multiple choice. but it made it a lot easier to figure out the right answers. Now, I don't remember any of the exact questions they asked on that test, but again, it covered a pretty broad spectrum of knowledge, and apparently, I passed. I don't remember what my exact score was, but I do remember knowing most of the answers and feeling like the questions on that test were way easier than the questions had been on the Jeopardy test, multiple choice or no. So anyway, I passed the test, and then I passed the interview portion, which is when I told them I would use my winnings to buy boobs, and they told me they'd call me when they were ready to have me on the show, just like they did with Jeopardy. And I don't remember it being very long between the time I auditioned and the time they called me, but I don't remember exactly how long it was. I mean, I know with Jeopardy, they called me almost immediately, so I had no time to study or anything. Well, with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire being my second game show, I was a little bit more prepared, and I had a little bit more time, I feel like, because I remember I carried around this little notebook with me and was writing down information and asking questions of everyone I came across about stuff that I didn't know anything about, like, you know, sports and cars and beer. I remember going to a brewery with my boyfriend at the time and asking him, you know, tell me the difference between ale and lager and Pilsner. I mean, I even remember asking him about the characters on the TV show SpongeBob SquarePants, because I never watched that show and he did, and well, gosh, they might have asked me a question about it. I mean, on that show, if you've ever watched it, you never know what they're gonna ask. So there I was, carrying around this weird little notebook, collecting all this random information, and well, then they finally called me to come on out and be on the show. Now with Jeopardy, it's easy because they filmed that in Burbank, which isn't that far from Vegas. It's a quick and cheap Southwest Airlines flight. But Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is filmed in New York City. And they don't pay your travel expenses or anything because, well, if you've ever watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the first 3, 4, 5 questions are really easy. So just about everyone who gets on that show makes at least $1,000. Which I guess they figure is enough to cover the cost of a plane ticket and a hotel room. Now, at the time, I had a boyfriend who liked to travel, and he liked fancy hotels, and he knew people in New York City, but he couldn't afford to take the time off work. And my mom, at that time, had a really good high-paying job, but, well, she couldn't get time off either, and so I had to go alone, and I am a notorious cheapskate. I mean, to be fair, I didn't know if I was gonna end up winning any money on the show, so well, I booked the cheapest JetBlue plane ticket I could find, and I booked the cheapest hotel room within walking distance of the studio that I could find. And let me tell you something, hotels in New York City ain't cheap. I was from Vegas. I was spoiled. You know, in Vegas, you could get a pretty nice hotel room for, well, back then, $50. Not so in New York City. Hotels are super expensive there. The cheapest one I could find was like, I think it was $85, and it was one of those rooms where it's just a bedroom and you have to share a bathroom down the hall, and there was a piece of cardboard in the window around the air conditioning unit. But I didn't really care, you know, I wasn't going to hang out in the room. I mean, I was literally just going to be on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I was gonna fly in, sleep for a few hours, then I had to get up and be at the studio at 7 a.m. or some ungodly hour, and then tape my show, and then go back to the airport and fly back to Vegas that same night. In retrospect, I'm not sure how I knew it was only gonna take one day to film the thing. Like, well, what if I won? What if I ended up winning a bunch of money and it would have taken, you know, more than one show to get there? I guess if that happened, then I wouldn't have felt too bad about creaking open my wallet and splurging for a second night of a hotel room and, well, rebooking my plane ticket. Anyway, in addition to making my travel arrangements, I also had to set up my lifelines. Okay, you know how on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you get 3 lifelines? Like if you can't figure out the answer, well, one of them is you can phone a friend. Well, it's actually a huge commitment to get someone to be your phone-a-friend on that show. Or at least it was back then. I mean, you had to get somebody who was willing to sit by a landline phone all day. Couldn't be a cell phone because, well, they wanted to make sure you had a good connection if you actually called them on the show. And they had to be available to sit by that landline phone pretty much all day because, well, they tape multiple episodes of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire every day, so you don't know what time of the day you're going to be on. So you have to find someone that's not only willing to sit by a landline phone, they have to sit by a landline phone all dang day. Anyway, they actually let you pick 5 different phone-a-friends. Or at least this is how it was back in 2006. Well, I think I auditioned for the show in late 2006, And then I went on, I think January 2007. So this is how it was back in 2007. Back then, at least, they let you pick 5 different people to have as phone a friends. So that way, I guess you could pick 5 different people with 5 different specialty areas of knowledge. Well, at that time, I guess I really didn't have very many friends that I felt like were that smart. So I used my family for one of the phone a friends. All my family, my 2 sisters, my mom, my brother, and my brother-in-law all took the day off and hung out in a room together to be my sort of like group phone a friend. So that way, if I called them, like odds are one of them would know the right answer. And then I used my boyfriend as one because, well, he knew a lot about sports. He knew every baseball statistic from the dawn of time. And he also knew a lot about cars. And he also knew a lot about the TV show Law and Order. But I really didn't know anybody else I could ask to be a phone a friend until I remembered this guy that I met at this random party at a casino in Southern California. My boyfriend at the time was a casino host. So he's basically one of those guys that calls up like high roller gamblers and tries to get them to come out and gamble in Vegas, and then he makes a commission on how much they end up gambling. Well, one time we went out to this casino in the hills outside San Diego because he had some client that was staying there. And they had some kind of cocktail reception for all the gamblers, and me and my boyfriend went, and I ended up talking to this guy there who was one of the high roller gamblers, and well, I mentioned to him that I had just auditioned for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and that I had passed the audition and that I might be going on the show sometime. And he was super excited about it. And he was like, oh, pick me as one of your lifelines. Apparently he had a huge crush on Meredith Vieira, who was the host of the show at that time, and she might still be the host. Anyway, this guy had a huge crush on her, and so if he was my lifeline and I ended up calling him, well, then that meant he'd be able to talk to Meredith Vieira on the air. Well, I didn't even know this guy very well. I just met him at this random cocktail party, but he did tell me he went to MIT, and he was kind of like a physics science guy. But like I said, it was a really big commitment to be somebody's phone a friend. Like he had to sit by a landline all dang day, and well, I wasn't really sure he'd go for it, but I was desperate. I had nobody else to ask, so I reached out to him and I was like, hey, okay, so I'm going on the show. Do you really want to be my lifeline? And he said yes. Gosh, I don't even really remember this guy's name. I feel like it might have been Dave. So if you happen to be watching this video, Dave, hi. Anyway, I got my 3 lifelines lined up, and I booked my cheap-ass plane ticket and my cheap-ass hotel room and flew off to New York City one night. I think I tried to do all of this in one day on my day off because, like I said, I'm a cheapskate and I didn't want to have to take a day off of work because at that time I worked a job that we just made commission. We didn't make an hourly wage or get any paid time off, and well, I didn't want to miss out on any money. And then when I got to New York City, I took the subway from the airport to my hotel room because it was cheaper than taking a taxi or a shuttle. I don't know New York City very well, but I flew into LaGuardia Airport, and I think the hotel, well, it was over by the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire studio, which I feel like was like Upper West Side? I don't know, kind of near Central Park. Anyway, taking the subway was super easy. It was easy to figure out. It was very safe. You know, you see all these TV shows about how, oh, the subway in New York City, you're going to get mugged and raped and robbed. And, well, golly, I think that all that stuff was filmed back in the 80s and 90s when they had a higher crime rate because it was really safe and really easy and, well, most importantly, really cheap. And then when I got to my hotel, well, like I said, it was pretty grim. Cardboard on the window, no bathroom in the room. I'd walk down the hall to take a shower, but again, I didn't care. Like, I don't remember. I got there probably like 7 p.m., ate something for dinner, and then took a shower and passed out because I had to be at the studio at like, oh gosh, I want to say like 7 a.m. or some ungodly hour. And you know, I wanted to do full hair and makeup before I went there because, well, gosh, if I'm going on TV, I want to look my best. So I ended up walking over to the TV studio the next morning wearing curlers, pulling my little roller suitcase behind me because, well, I didn't want to take my rollers out till the last minute to make sure my hair was nice and fluffy and big by the time I got my big TV appearance. Forgive me, but I'm getting a little chilly making this video. I'm gonna put this shawl on. Like I said, I'm in the casita, and there's no heater in here. I mean, I do have a space heater, but, well, I had to unplug it to plug in my studio lights to make this video, and it's cold. Anyway, where was I? Walked over to the hotel wearing curlers, toting my roller bag like a real hillbilly. Got to the studio. They invited us into the green room. We had coffee and Danish or whatever, and a production assistant came in to kind of explain to us how the day was gonna go. So they don't just shoot one episode a day, just like Jeopardy. They shoot a bunch of different episodes in a single day. So they had a whole bunch of contestants waiting there to go on. And so they would do one at a time. And when a contestant crapped out and got the wrong answer, well, then they would call the next one up. Well, I didn't want to be the first one to go. But at the same time, I didn't want to have to sit around all day waiting for my turn. And I wanted to make sure they did get to me on the first day because, well, gosh, like I said, I only planned on spending one day in New York City and I already had my return flight booked. That same, well, it was 6 a.m. the next day. So my plan was just to, tape my show, take the subway back to the airport, and then kind of like sleep in the gate area at the airport until they boarded the flight at like 5 a.m. I told you, I was on a budget. Well, lucky for me, I didn't have to go first. And I don't think I had to wait too long. I don't remember how many contestants they went through before they called me, but it was really interesting and kind of nerve-wracking to watch. Like, I remember there was this one poor lady who actually did get like the very first question wrong. Like I was saying, usually the first 3-4 questions are super easy because, well, I guess it makes for better TV for people to get the first few questions right so that they start getting to the higher dollar amount questions and then it's more dramatic. But this one poor lady, well, I think it was like a cultural thing because she was British by birth. And the question they asked her, like for an American, would have been like super easy. It was something about the nursery rhyme, Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet. But I guess they don't have that same nursery rhyme in England. If you're watching this in the UK, let me know. So she didn't know the answer, man. She struck out on like the first question. But it wasn't that big a deal for her because I think she was from New Jersey or someplace kind of in the area. So it's not like she had to, buy a plane ticket and fly halfway across the country and get a hotel room like some of us. Now, meanwhile, I guess I should mention that I was stone cold sober through all of this. I think I mentioned in my Jeopardy vlog that, well, when I went on Jeopardy, it was the first time I ever went on television and I was really nervous. So I made myself some potent potables by mixing up White Russians and pouring them into those little glass Starbucks bottles so they look like Frappuccinos. And I was able to smuggle them on set and sit there sipping at them all day to sort of steady my nerves. I mean, it was just Kahlua, so it wasn't like it was strong enough to really impact my performance, I don't think. But it was just enough to sort of keep me calm. And then between the time I went on Jeopardy and the time I went on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I also went on American Idol, which is a whole nother story and a whole nother video. But when I went on American Idol, I was also really nervous. And so for that show, I actually brought this little flask. This is an alcohol flask that back then, this was, I guess, 2005, everybody had those little Nokia phones that fit into these holders like this. Well, this is a flask my sister got me that's designed to look like a cell phone in a holder, but the antenna unscrews. Oh, it's gummed shut with God knows what kind of liquor is in here. I haven't opened this thing in years. Anyway, I brought this thing with me to the American Idol set, and I think I had like just vodka or something in it, and so I would go in the bathroom like every now and then and just unscrew the antenna and take a little nip just to calm myself down. But here in New York at 7 a.m., the last thing I felt like doing was drinking, so I had to sit through this whole process sober. But I guess by then, I'd already been on TV a couple of times, so well, I guess I wasn't that nervous anyway. Although, when you actually get there, get on set, and they, you sit in that seat. If you've ever watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you sit in that seat, and all those lights come down, and that music, dun dun dun. Well, it can make you pretty nervous. But the host back then, and maybe still the host, was Meredith Vieira, and she seemed like a really genuinely nice woman, and she was really good about making you feel comfortable. I sat down and she asked me, started doing the little chit chat, asking me questions. What's your name? Where are you from? And most importantly, if you win the $1 million, what are you gonna do with it? Well, I still couldn't believe they were gonna run this on ABC, a family network, but I went ahead and told her my whole story. Well, gee, Meredith, I've always been flat-chested, but I live in Las Vegas, where it seems like everyone has big boobs. So if I win the $1 million, I'm gonna buy myself a pair of boobs. And then, of course, everybody in the audience started laughing, and Meredith chuckled, and, well, I guess it just sort of broke the ice, and it did actually make me a little bit less nervous. And then we started the game. Now, I don't remember what any of the early first few questions were, because like I said, the first few are usually really easy. And you definitely don't want to have to use any of your lifelines on the early questions, because you want to save your 3 lifelines for when the questions really start getting hard. Now, besides your phone a friend, you also get, you get one where you can ask the audience what they think the answer is, and then you get one more that's called a 50-50, where they eliminate 2 of the 4 multiple choice answers, and so it kind of narrows it down for you. But you don't want to use any of those lifelines on the first few questions. And unfortunately for me, I think I only made it to the $8,000 question, and I already had to use one of my lifelines. The question was something about what is the most commonly transplanted human organ? Okay, and that might seem like a pretty easy question. Go ahead. I'll give you some time to come up with the answer. Wait. Wrong show. Anyway, what is the most commonly transplanted human organ? And I don't remember what the 4 choices were. It was like heart, lung, liver, and kidney, something like that. And so, yeah, it might be obvious to you that it's kidney, but let me tell you something. When you're sitting in that seat with all those studio lights on you and that music and everyone's watching and Meredith Vieira is sitting there right across from you and there's $1 million potentially on the line, well, it's not that easy. I mean, if you get it wrong, you go all the way back down to, well, I guess I would have gone down to $1,000. So you don't want to give the wrong answer. I mean, better to use a lifeline than to crap out and only go home with $1,000. So I used one of my lifelines. I asked the audience because, well, to be honest, I didn't put that much faith in the intelligence of the audience, you know, the intelligence of the common man. So I thought, okay, let me ask them about one of the easier questions. So I put it to the audience, what's the most commonly transplanted human organ? And, you know, I guess there's a little tablet they put by each seat. So when the contestant asks the audience, everybody pulls out their tablet and punches in the answer. And then it shows you a graph, like how many people said A, how many people said B, C, D. Well, like 99% of everybody in the audience said kidney. Duh. So, okay, I'm gonna trust the audience. D, kidney. Final answer. And by the way, yes, it did feel really weird to be sitting there on TV saying, final answer. Surreal. Anyway, lucky for me, the audience was right, and come to find out, the kidney is the most commonly transplanted human organ, which I guess I should have known because I guess a lot of people with diabetes end up having to get kidney transplants. Well, I wasn't sure enough to risk the money, so I used one of my lifelines, and well, by gum, now I had $8,000 in the bank and I was on my way to the $16,000 question. In an airplane cockpit, the instrument called the artificial horizon is more formally known as what? And then, of course, all the dun dun dun. You know, they have that weird, like, suspenseful ambient music playing. And then you're sitting there in the chair going, golly, I don't know. It's either the airspeed indicator, the altimeter, the attitude indicator, or the transponder. Well, I had no idea. I don't think I had ever even been in an airplane cockpit at that time. And I was stumped. I mean, I had no idea. So I figured I had no choice but to use another lifeline. And I had already used my Ask the Audience. So it was either 50-50 or phone a friend. And 50-50 wouldn't have done me any good on this question because, like I said, I had zero clue as to the correct answer. So I thought, well, gosh, I better phone a friend. And I didn't think anybody in my family would know the answer to this one because, well, not at that time. Nowadays, my brother is actually taking flight lessons. So, well, these days he'd probably know the answer. But back then, and then my boyfriend wouldn't have known. So I thought, well, hell, I guess I'm going to call that random MIT guy I met at that cocktail party at that casino in the hills outside San Diego that day. I mean, he went to MIT. He was a science guy. Surely he knew everything about airplane controls. So I made his dreams come true and called him, and he got to be on the air and talk to Meredith Vieira. Well, he knew the answer right away. Like, I think when you call somebody on that show, they have 30 seconds or a minute or something to come up with the answer. But he answered me right away. And gosh, I don't even remember what the answer was. This is really embarrassing. I think I do have this episode recorded on a DVD somewhere, but I don't know where it is. And gosh, I was always too embarrassed to ever watch it. So I've never watched it. So I don't remember. You're watching this now. Everyone's probably going, it's B, you idiot, or whatever the answer is. I don't remember what the answer is, but my phone a friend knew right away. He told me in the first 2 seconds. He's like, final answer for sure. And so he spent the rest of the time that he had just chatting up Meredith Vieira, like, hey, Meredith, how are you doing? And I remember everybody in the audience was kind of laughing. It was kind of funny. But before his time ran out, I was like, are you sure? And he was like, yeah, I'm sure. Final answer. So whatever he told me to say, I said, final answer. And he was right. Woo! So now I was up to $16,000. And I remember Meredith Vieira making some kind of joke about, well, now you have enough money to buy 2 pairs of boobs. I mean, at that time, I think a boob job cost, in Vegas, a boob job cost about $6,000. So yeah, I had enough for 2 or maybe even 3 sets. I could have looked like a cat or a pig if I wanted to. I think she even made a joke like, oh, well, maybe you can get a set for me. I still couldn't believe we were talking about this on ABC, but come to find out, I think when they aired the show, they did beep out or bleep out the word boobs. I mean, those were kinder, gentler times, early 2007. Nowadays, they talk about much worse than that on TV without bleeping it out. Now, I should be honest and say that I wasn't 100% sure that I actually wanted to go through with it and get fake boobs, even if I won the money. I had gone to a plastic surgeon a few years before for a consultation about it, but I chickened out at the last minute because I wasn't sure I wanted to do that to my body. But this was like 4 or 5 years later, and while I was dating this guy who was a casino host. And so as part of his business, we had to take his clients out to a lot of nightclubs to entertain them. So I spent a lot of time in these Vegas nightclubs where all the women had ginormous knockers shoved up to their chins, and well, I guess it made me feel more inadequate than ever. And well, maybe I thought it might make my boyfriend like me better. I don't know, but I still wasn't 100% sure that I would actually go through with it, even if I won the money. But whatever, I could worry about all that later. Now it was time to focus because I was moving on to the $25,000 question. But before they could get to that, they ran out of time on that particular episode, and well, I was gonna have to come back the next day to finish my game. Now, like I said, they shoot more than 1 episode per day. They shoot, I don't know, 6 or 7 per day. So I didn't really have to go home and come back the next day. I really just had to go back in the green room, change into a new outfit, and then make it look like I had gone home and was coming back the next day. And I should note that I am wearing the same shirt that I wore in that screen grab. This is the exact same shirt I wore on day 1 of my Who Wants to Be a Millionaire appearance. Okay, so now it's the $25,000 question, and I only had 1 lifeline left, my 50-50. So I was really hoping that it would turn out to be something that I actually knew about. Now, I am, believe it or not, a pretty smart person. I'm pretty well read, and moreover, I retain information pretty well, in particular, useless trivial information. But you never know. On that show, it's kind of just luck of the draw what they're going to ask you about. I mean, it might turn out to be something you know all about, or it might be something you know nothing about. And guess which one it was for me? Well, it turned out to be a question about U.S. history, which is something I know a lot about. I used to read a lot of books when I was younger about the presidents, a lot of presidential biographies. And the question was something like, which U.S. president passed the bill to desegregate the armed forces? And I think the 4 multiple choices were, it was Woodrow Wilson, Harry S. Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, or maybe John F. Kennedy. I don't remember the 4th one. All I remember is thinking, I mean, I used to read a ton of history, in particular, presidential history. I mean, me and my brother used to sit there and recite all the U.S. presidents in order from George Washington all the way up to, well, gosh, at that time, I guess it was Bill Clinton. And then I used to read a lot of presidential biographies. I knew a lot about U.S. presidential history. But when it came to who passed the bill to desegregate the armed forces, gosh, I wasn't sure enough to risk losing almost all my winnings. because that's how that game works. If you guess the wrong answer, you go all the way back down to $1,000. So I kind of sat there trying to reason the answer. Like, okay, I remembered in World War II, there was an all-black air squadron, the Tuskegee Airmen. They were all black. So I knew that in World War II, the armed forces must have still been segregated. So it had to be somebody who was president after World War II, which eliminated Woodrow Wilson. And gosh, I don't remember who the fourth one was. Maybe it wasn't Kennedy. Maybe it was somebody who was president before World War II. I don't know. For me, I knew it was either Truman or Eisenhower, but I wasn't sure enough which one to really make a guess. Well, I still had one more lifeline, which was that 50-50, where the computer eliminates two of the answers, leaving you just two answers to choose from. But guess what? It seems like this happens every time I'm watching the show and someone uses the 50-50. It always eliminates the ones that you already didn't think it was anyways. So in my case, the computer eliminated Wilson and Kennedy or whoever the other one was, and left me with Eisenhower and Truman. I honestly had no idea which of those two it was. I mean, they were both presidents after World War II, so either one of them could have passed that damn bill, but I had no idea which one it was. And yes, meanwhile, come to find out, everyone and their Aunt Sally knows the answer to this question. Well, I didn't, okay? And so I was faced with a real dilemma. I could make a guess, but if I got it wrong, then I would walk away with only $1,000. You know, I'd go right back down to $1,000, which after they take taxes out of it was barely enough to cover my hotel and my airfare. But if I guessed right, then I would go on to the $50,000 question. You know, I'd have $25,000 in the bank and the chance to win even more. And with any luck, the next question might be about something I actually knew about. But I also had a third option, because on that show, you can also choose to walk away, which is basically you just say, I don't know the answer. I'm just going to walk away with what I've won so far. So in my case, I could have walked away with $16,000, which really isn't too shabby for a day's work, I guess. Now, interestingly, I went into this whole experience not even really thinking about the fact that I could potentially win $1 million, you know, which is a life-changing amount of money. That didn't even factor into any of this for me. I kind of just did it more for the fun of it and for the exposure. And yeah, I guess, you know, winning some money was nice, but I guess I didn't even expect to get up to any of the high dollar questions, because if you watch that show, most contestants do crap out around 16, 25,000, you know, right around the level I was at. So I guess I just sort of figured it was unlikely that I would win six figures anyways, which I'm glad that I didn't have that expectation for myself, because that would have made me even more nervous. So I just sat there in that chair with the music and the lights trying to figure out what to do. I mean, what would you have done? Would you have walked away with the 16 grand? Or would you have tried to guess? I mean, it was down to two choices. I had 50-50 odds of getting the right answer. And if I guessed right, well, maybe I would go on to win $1 million. But I'm pretty risk averse, and I think I even said that to Meredith Vieira on the show when I decided to just walk away with $16,000. I think I said something to her like, well, I know I'm from Vegas, but I'm not much of a gambler. So I'm just gonna walk away. I mean, it's like the ultimate gambler of all time, Kenny Rogers, once said, you got to know when to hold 'em. Know when to fold 'em. Well, I folded and walked away with $16,000. Well, then Meredith Vieira revealed what the right answer was, and everybody in the audience groaned because, like I said, apparently everyone and their Aunt Sally knows the answer to that question, and it's Harry S. Truman. Duh. In fact, one of my boyfriend's clients happened to be in the audience. He had this one client who lived kind of near New York City, and that guy had come into town to sit in the audience and watch me play. And so he told me later he was sitting in the audience trying to send me the correct answer telepathically. Well, apparently the wires got crossed because I never got his message. But whatever, the show was over. Meredith thanked me very kindly for coming on the show and told me to enjoy my new boobs, and well, that was the end of it. I mean, by this time, I think it was only like 1 p.m. And like I said, my flight wasn't until 6 a.m. the following morning. So I had quite a bit of time to kill. Now, the client, my boyfriend's client that was in the audience, he had actually offered to take me out for sushi after the show, and then he had a hotel room in town that night, which he even offered to let me share the hotel room. It had 2 beds, which was very kind of him. But since he was in the studio audience, I don't think they let the audience leave until the last show was finished taping for the day. So he was stuck there till like 5 p.m. And it was only something like 1. So I had a few hours to kill before I could meet up with him for sushi, but they wouldn't even let me hang around in the studio. I mean, they were like, the second I was done taping, they wanted to like shove me out the door. I was hoping they would let me just like hang out in the green room or something, but they barely let me change my clothes into something more comfortable in like a utility closet before they shoved me back out onto the streets. So I just kind of dragged my little roller suitcase over to Central Park and sat down on a bench and made some phone calls. I mean, obviously I wanted to call my family and my boyfriend and let them know they don't need to sit around on the phone anymore. I'm done. And well, I had to sign some kind of agreement that I wouldn't reveal the outcome of the show because obviously they want to keep that stuff a surprise for when it's broadcast. But come on, it was my family. But I was still like really paranoid, you know, I didn't want to get in trouble. So I remember I think I went into like a bunch of trees or bushes or something, called my mom, was like, hey, on my old flip phone that I had back then, hey mom, I'm done with the show. You guys don't have to sit by the phone anymore. Oh, well, how'd it go? Oh, well, I won $16,000. I think I was like seriously whispering, like I was freaked out. But anyway, after I talked on the phone to them, I think I just ended up going to a Starbucks or something and hanging out drinking coffee for 3-4 hours until the shows were done taping for the day and my boyfriend's client was able to come out and pick me up and take me out for sushi. Which, of course, I insisted on paying for the sushi dinner since he was going to let me stay in the hotel room too. But I didn't actually even end up spending the whole night in the room because I was too amped up by the whole experience to sleep. So I remember I got up in the middle of the night and just like wheeled my little rolly bag back to the subway and took the subway back to the airport and sat in the gate area at the airport until they boarded the flight at 5 a.m. and I finally went back to blessed Vegas. But I should note that it was very kind of that guy to let me share his hotel room. So on the off chance you're watching this, hi, Bill. Thank you. Mwah. So anyway, I went back to Vegas and the show aired a few months later. I don't remember how long it took, but I don't think they actually paid you your winnings until the show aired. So the show finally came on and they mailed me a check for $16,000. And what was really cool about it is the check came with this card that says it has the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire logo on it. And it was personally signed by Meredith Vieira. How sweet is that? I love how she wrote, here's to a new set of boobs or whatever you fancy. I mean, she knew I probably wasn't really going to get a boob job, you know? These showbiz people know what it's all about. They know it's all just showbiz and you're just saying stuff to get on TV. So I really didn't have to feel obligated to get implants, but well, I'm one of those weird people who does feel a sense of obligation and I like to keep my word. So when I got the check for $16,000, which by the way, they do send you the full amount of your winnings. I mean, I don't know if I won the million, I don't know if they would have sent me all that up front, but they send you the full amount and then you just have to put it on your taxes as miscellaneous income. And at that time, I was only making like $35,000 a year. So I don't even think they taxed me at a very high rate on it. So, I don't know, gosh, I probably got about $14,000 out of it. Anyway, when I got the money, I went straight to a plastic surgeon very dutifully to fulfill my obligation and paid $50 for another consultation. But this plastic surgeon was actually, I give him a lot of credit. He was actually kind of a cool guy because he was honest with me, okay? Yeah, he could have just taken my money, but he told me, and, you know, forgive me if there's kids in the room, but he pointed out the fact that I have a very bony chest. I don't have a lot of flesh or skin on my body in general, and particularly not on my chest. So if he gave me implants, he could put one in here and one in here. But, you know, I would never have cleavage. There was always going to be like a gap between it. I think they call it bolt-ons. When you see women, really skinny women with two big fake boobs, they look like they're bolted on. So I would have basically had bolt-ons and I wouldn't have had cleavage and I wouldn't have been fooling anybody. And Well, this doctor was very upfront and honest with me about that, and so I thanked him for his time. You know, I gave him the $50, and I went home and thought about it for about 3 minutes, and then I decided, no way, I'm not getting them kind of boobs. I mean, if you think about it, all these women, they get fake breasts. They say implants are supposed to last about 10 years. Nowadays, I'd say maybe 15 years. Okay, so you get the implants put in. Say you're 30 years old, you get implants. Okay, well, when you're 45, it's time to go back in and get a new set of implants. And then when you're 60, it's time to go back in and get another set of implants. And then when you're 75, it's time to go back in and get another set of implants. And then when you're 90, are you really supposed to keep going back in and getting new sets of implants? Because if you don't, if you just get them taken out, you know, otherwise they might rupture or something. And I actually know somebody that happened to. She got really sick from her implants and she had them taken out. Well, then you're just left with these like empty bags of skin. I mean, especially if you're like 75 or 90 years old, like who wants that? I feel like getting breast implants is actually a lifelong commitment. And a lot of these girls in Vegas at that time, or I guess even still now, well, I guess they just weren't really thinking that far ahead. So I never did get boobs, but that didn't stop me from becoming a successful nude model anyway. That's right, a few years after I went on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I started working as an artistic nude model. And oh gosh, I had no shortage of photographers that were willing to hire me. In fact, many of the photographers who hired me told me that one of the reasons they did hire me is that I had natural breasts. Come to find out, a lot of photographers, and I guess a lot of guys in general, don't like the look of implants, and well, they'd rather photograph a woman with natural breasts, even if they are itty bitty. So what did I do with my winnings? Well, I pissed them all away on a down payment on a house. That's right, later that same year, my boyfriend and I decided to buy a house together, and unfortunately, it all had to be in my name because even though I only made $35,000 a year, I had a really good credit rating and I had a much longer employment history than he did. He was like 7 years younger than me. And even though he was making a really good income, 6-figure income as a host, he'd only been working for 2 years. So I looked better on paper. I had to be the one to sign the papers and put the house in my name, and I was the one left holding the bag. Because remember, this was the year 2007 in Las Vegas. So guess what happened? The house value went down. My boyfriend and I broke up. I ended up short selling the house, and all my hard-earned Who Wants to Be a Millionaire money ended up in the pockets of Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase Bank. And guess what happened to him? He got a bailout. Arrgh. Oh well, if there's one thing I've learned in life thus far, it's win some, lose some. I might not have won the $1 million, but at least I got a fun adventure out of it.